Hi there, I'm Isabel Munroe, systems engineer at Gray Holdings, and I've been building their digital infrastructure for 7 years like some kind of caffeinated digital archaeologist. Started as a junior developer straight out of MIT, worked my way up through sheer determination, an unhealthy addiction to solving impossible problems, and enough energy drinks to power a small European nation. My colleagues call me the code whisperer. I can debug systems that make grown programmers weep into their mechanical keyboards and question their life choices. Gray Holdings occupies 3 floors of a gleaming downtown tower, all glass and pretension. We're a mid-tier financial services company trying to punch above its weight class, like a scrappy boxer who talks a big game but keeps getting knocked down by bigger opponents. We handle investment portfolios for boutique firms across the Northeast, managing assets that would make lottery winners jealous, and our reputation hinges on exactly one thing: reliability. When wealthy clients entrust us with their generational wealth, our systems better not hiccup, stutter, or even think about taking a coffee break. The office culture is peak corporate theater: standing desks nobody uses, a meditation room that's been converted to storage, and enough motivational posters to wallpaper a small apartment. The break room coffee tastes like disappointment mixed with artificial vanilla, but the view from the 32nd floor makes you forget you're essentially a highly educated hamster in a very expensive wheel. Robert Blackwood became my manager 18 months ago, descending from the corporate heavens like some kind of MBA-wielding angel of bureaucracy. Classic corporate climber, Wharton MBA that he mentions in every conversation, perfectly pressed suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and the emotional intelligence of a parking meter that's been unplugged for 6 months. He talks a big game about synergistic solutions, paradigm shifts, and leveraging core competencies, but couldn't write a line of code if his quarterly bonus depended on it. I once watched him spend 20 minutes trying to update his LinkedIn password. The leadership program announcement came last Tuesday like a golden ticket wrapped in corporate jargon. 6 months of executive training, guaranteed promotion track, direct mentorship from the C-suite, and the kind of networking opportunities that turn careers into legends. I'd been eyeing it for years, building my case meticulously like a lawyer preparing for the Supreme Court. Every project delivered ahead of schedule, every crisis averted with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker, every system optimization that saved the company thousands while Robert took credit in quarterly reviews. I knocked on Robert's office door with my application packet, confident and prepared. 20 minutes later, I walked out empty-handed and humiliated. I knocked on Robert's corner office door, application packet in hand, feeling like a knight entering the dragon's lair. His office was a shrine to corporate indulgence: mahogany desk, walls plastered with accolades, and a skyline view worthy of a luxury ad. 20 minutes later, I left empty-handed, professionally gutted by a man in a $1,000 suit. "Isabel, I appreciate your enthusiasm," Robert said, eyes glued to his phone. "But honestly? You're too valuable where you are. Too valuable." Translation: too convenient to promote. I was his fixer, the tech expert who kept things from imploding whenever chaos loomed. "I've been leading teams informally for 2 years, I replied, forcing composure. "My work on the Morrison account alone. Technical leadership isn't business leadership." He looked up, offering a patronizing smile. "Someone has to keep the lights on while the real leaders strategize. That's you. Think of yourself as essential infrastructure. Like a power grid. Critical, but taken for granted until it crashes." I nodded. "Professional. Calm. Everything women in tech are trained to be while less qualified men climb past." "I'm recommending Jake Morrison for the program," Robert added. Fresh perspective. Someone not so entrenched. Jake. 6 months in the company. Frat bro charm, golf buddy, and zero clue how our systems actually worked. The kind of guy who called technical work simple and bragged about beer tastings more than certifications. Back at my desk, my worn cubicle, not a corner office, I sat in my familiar chair and did something I'd never done in 7 years at Gray Holdings. I started planning professional revenge. Not sabotage. Strategy. Precise, measured, and inevitable. I wasn't angry. Anger is loud, impulsive. This was colder, strategic patience. Documentation. Positioning. A slow, quiet build-up that would prove just how wrong Robert's judgment was. The walk back had felt like a funeral march for my belief in meritocracy. Past the cliched motivational posters, past colleagues who looked away with pity, and past the conference room where Robert probably spun his next HR optimization plan. At my desk, I stared at diagnostic monitors that most execs couldn't interpret if their lives depended on it. And in that silence, something clicked into place. That night, I stayed late under the pretense of routine maintenance, corporate code 4, quietly plotting my professional revenge as the cleaning crew vacuumed around me. After hours, the office took on a strange stillness, fluorescent lights buzzing, air vents whispering, and server LEDs blinking like fireflies in the dark. In truth, I was conducting a full-scale audit of our infrastructure, digging into system guts like a forensic expert investigating a suspicious death. If Robert wanted to keep me in the shadows while his golfing buddies climbed the ladder, fine. I was going to measure my true value, and how doomed they'd be without me. What I uncovered was horrifying. Our security protocols were a joke, outdated encryption, unpatched vulnerabilities flagged months ago, and admin passwords older than some interns. Robert had slashed IT security budgets to inflate his department's profit margins, ignoring my repeated warnings like swatting away flies. The authentication system? A ticking time bomb. A curious teenager with a laptop and a YouTube tutorial could waltz into our servers and help themselves to client data. We were guarding millions in assets with digital duct tape and hope. But being too valuable where you are comes with its perks. I knew these systems intimately, every process, every loophole, every weak point. I didn't just maintain the infrastructure, I was the infrastructure. My fingerprints were embedded in every core system. The architecture bent to my commands like an orchestra responding to its conductor. So I began to document. Methodically. Ruthlessly. Screenshots, server logs, archived emails where I raised alarms only to be brushed off with buzzwords like risk tolerance and budget optimization. I mapped the structure like a crime scene, card by card, until I could pinpoint exactly where and how it would all collapse. Not out of spite, but as proof. Sometimes, the only way to demonstrate your worth is to let others experience what happens without you. Not through sabotage, amateurs resort to that, but through natural consequence. Through the slow unraveling of a system built on neglect and arrogance. Thus began the education plan, my internal name for the blueprint that would show Gray Holdings just how irreplaceable I truly was. Every ignored alert, every reckless budget cut, every vulnerability I'd flagged, it was all preserved, time-stamped, and ready. This wasn't about vengeance. It was a scientific experiment. Hypothesis: Isabel Munroe is too valuable where she is. Method: withdraw her from the equation and observe. No loud resignation. No tantrums or ultimatums. Those could be dismissed as emotional reactions. What I planned was colder, undeniable proof, built on evidence, patterns, and consequences. If I was going to be treated like invisible support, I'd show exactly what happened when that support disappeared. Not to destroy, but to teach. Some lessons are only learned through failure. And some people only recognize your worth when you're no longer there to save them. The next morning, I reached out to Amy Chen in legal, one of the rare few at Gray Holdings who managed to succeed without losing her soul. We'd collaborated before during late-night compliance scrambles, where she translated my technical concerns into legal terms executives couldn't ignore. She actually listened when I talked about encryption and security protocols, a rarity. She scrolled through my audit over burnt breakroom coffee, her expression darkening with every page. Isabel, this is deeply concerning. Have you shown this to Robert? Multiple times. He says fixing it isn't cost-effective. Apparently, data breaches are cheaper than prevention. Amy's lawyer instincts kicked in. This is a liability nightmare. If there's a breach targeting client data. I know. I leaned back in the breakroom chair, both overpriced and ergonomically cruel. Let me ask you something hypothetical. If an employee repeatedly reported critical vulnerabilities through proper channels and was ignored, where would they stand legally if something catastrophic happened? She didn't blink. Hypothetically? Very strong position, especially with documentation. That kind of trail is litigation gold. Later that afternoon, Jake Morrison showed up at my desk, Robert's golden boy, fresh-pressed and clearly panicking. Hey Isabel, Robert said you might help me get up to speed on the core systems? Just, the basics? Of course, I said sweetly. Though these systems are highly complex, interdependent layers, legacy quirks, custom protocols. Took years to master. Right, but maybe you could write up a manual? I nearly laughed. 7 years of institutional knowledge, late-night crisis fixes, and critical insight, reduced to something he could skim between meetings. Jake, this isn't the kind of system you can learn from a PDF. It's more like brain surgery. Would you trust a neurosurgeon who trained on YouTube? His face fell. But if something happened to you, like if you left or got promoted. Something like what, Jake? I asked, curious. He hesitated, realizing he'd just admitted Robert had no succession plan. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. He wasn't dumb, just out of his depth and smart enough to know it. Don't worry, I said with a glacial smile. I'm not going anywhere. Robert said I'm too valuable where I am. Over the next few days, others followed. Alex from marketing dropped by asking about basic functionality, Code 4, teach me enough to bluff it. Ryan from sales wanted buzzwords for meetings. Even senior staff started poking around about system backups and documentation. It was like everyone had woken up to realize they lived on a volcano, and it was rumbling. Office dynamics shifted. Colleagues who'd seen me as the go-to fixer now approached with an edge of nervous respect. Robert's too valuable comment had spread, and the implication was clear: if someone as capable as me could be passed over, no one was safe. By Thursday, I'd completed my documentation with the obsessive precision of a medieval monk. Every vulnerability catalogued, every ignored warning timestamped, every budget cut traced to its inevitable consequence. I encrypted the files with military-grade algorithms and stored them in multiple secure locations, cloud backups, offline drives and safety deposit boxes, even a printed copy with my attorney. If Robert wanted to play corporate checkers, I was playing championship chess. Then came Friday morning. The leadership program announcement hit inboxes like a digital slap, glossy photos, buzzword bingo, and all 6 names spotlighted in bold font. Jake, of course, was front and center. Alongside 5 others I had trained, mentored, or dragged over the finish line when they couldn't tell a kernel panic from a coffee break. The email praised their fresh perspectives and innovative thinking, corporate code 4, safe, non-threatening, and politically connected. My phone lit up with a steady stream of WTF messages. The worst came from Tyler Brooks in HR. Isabel, I'm so sorry. You deserved this. Everyone knows it. Robert's making a huge mistake. That afternoon, Robert summoned me into his office, flanked by Jake, Alex from marketing, and Ryan from sales. All 3 looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Isabel, Robert said, tone full of smug confidence, I need you to prepare a handover document. These gentlemen will be stepping into broader roles, and they'll need to understand your systems. A handover document, I repeated, keeping my voice even as I marveled at his audacity. Succession planning. Cross-training. We can't have institutional knowledge locked up in one person's head. Everyone in the room knew how ridiculous that was. You can't transfer 7 years of intimate systems knowledge into a Google document. But Robert wanted to prove I was replaceable, like benching a star player just to prove a point. Of course, I said sweetly. Should I include detailed descriptions of the security vulnerabilities I've been reporting? The ones that could trigger federal investigations if breached? Robert's jaw clenched. Jake, Alex, and Ryan shifted uneasily. Just focus on operational procedures, he said tightly. Security is being addressed, through other channels. Translation, ignore the flaming wreckage and pretend everything's fine. Understood. I'll have documentation ready by Monday. Should I CC the board? They're always interested in risk management. Color drained from Robert's face like a printer running out of toner. That won't be necessary. Internal only. Of course. Internal only, I echoed, scribbling on my notepad in large, legible letters. Security issues excluded, per Robert's directive. That weekend, I created the most meticulously unhelpful documentation in corporate history. Dozens of pages of diagram-heavy fluff, protocol descriptions so dense they read like Sanskrit, and troubleshooting guides that would confuse even senior engineers. It was malicious compliance with the precision of a scalpel. Everything Robert asked for. Nothing he actually needed. The kind of document that impresses in boardrooms, and collapses in real-world use. Turning point/revelation. At exactly 11:47 a.m., our primary authentication server threw a tantrum, error messages exploded across monitoring dashboards like digital fireworks. Nothing fatal, just enough instability to make the system feel like it had joined a union and gone on strike mid-shift. Users were randomly logged out, transactions delayed, and connections timed out like we'd resurrected dial-up from the dead. Jake appeared at my desk, wild-eyed and sweating like someone told him he was about to perform open-heart surgery using YouTube tutorials. Isabel, what's happening? Did the new protocols cause this? Is this about the handover doc? I'm investigating, I replied, calm as a bomb tech defusing live ordnance. The logs told a familiar story, cascading failures triggered by stress on outdated infrastructure. I'd seen this pattern before, dominoes tipping one by one because no one wanted to fix the first one properly. Can you fix it? Jake asked, desperation oozing from every pore. I'm working on it. But here's the thing, this wasn't a fluke. It was the inevitable result of running modern demands on antique code. I'd been screaming about this for months. Robert just preferred to bury those warnings in the circular filing cabinet under his desk. I had a choice, apply another short-term band-aid that would buy us time and guarantee future failure, or fix the root cause properly, an overhaul that would take hours but finally stabilize our systems. I chose the second. Robert stormed over like a man late to his own downfall. How long will this take? He barked. These issues stem directly from the vulnerabilities I've flagged for months. Fixing them requires implementing the security updates you've repeatedly postponed. His face paled. We don't have time for that. Just patch it. Get it working. I can patch it, I said mildly, but the system will still be vulnerable. Do whatever it takes. Now. Understood. Then I got to work, not on the patch he expected, but on the comprehensive security upgrades he'd stonewalled for a year. No more duct tape. No more magical thinking. Just actual, lasting repairs. While I worked, I sent a meticulously worded email to Amy Chen in legal. Per your request for security documentation, attached is the full audit. Today's system instability highlights the precise vulnerabilities previously flagged. I'm initiating corrective actions now. Please retain this for compliance and regulatory reference. Clear. Professional. Legally bulletproof. Robert wanted plausible deniability. I gave him documented accountability. Our newly enhanced intrusion detection system, quietly upgraded during Monday's maintenance with the stealth of a cyber ninja, lit up like a paranoid Christmas tree. A sophisticated attack was underway, targeting the exact vulnerabilities I'd been flagging for months. Not some amateur playing hacker, this was professional, coordinated, and precise. My phone detonated with calls and notifications. Robert. Jake. Amy. Tyler from HR. Even the CEO, who probably hadn't seen 3 a.m. since college. But I was already in the office, sipping industrial-strength coffee and watching the breach unfold like I'd scripted it, which, in a way, I had. Robert burst into the server room in yesterday's clothes, his usually perfect hair disheveled and tie half removed. We're under attack, he gasped. Client data, our reputation, everything's at risk. Already contained, I said, calm as ever. The upgrades I deployed yesterday neutralized the breach within minutes. No data was accessed. We're secure. The relief on his face was immediate and pathetic. But you need to understand, I continued, the attack exploited the same vulnerabilities I've documented for 8 months. If I hadn't implemented those changes yesterday, this would have been catastrophic. You saved us? He asked, like someone experiencing his first real consequence. No, I said. My ignored documentation saved us. The non-essential upgrades you kept postponing saved us. The leadership you overlooked just prevented a disaster. Jake stumbled in 20 minutes later, looking like he'd lost a fight with a hedge and then been asked to teach quantum physics. What's going on? Are we safe? Should I call someone? We're fine, I said, I still on the forensic logs. But we'll be initiating mandatory reporting. Amy's prepping the documentation now. We'll need a full post-incident audit. Robert turned a shade paler. He understood the fallout. A full-blown federal audit would expose every cut corner, every silenced warning, every prioritization of optics over infrastructure. Maybe we don't need to make this a huge deal, he began. Robert, I interrupted, this was an attempted breach of federally protected financial data. This isn't optional. It's criminal. It's reportable. And pretending otherwise only deepens the liability. There was no spin, no metaphorical rug large enough to sweep this under. The breach had triggered the legal and regulatory machinery, and any cover-up attempt would bury him and the company faster than the attack itself. Jake stood frozen. Leadership potential meant nothing in a crisis. Alex and Ryan arrived shortly after, clearly summoned more as witnesses than contributors. When the CEO arrived with Amy and 2 board members, the mood in the server room crystallized into courtroom tension. Margaret Steinberg, the board chair, looked like she'd seen this kind of fire before, and usually let people burn. Thomas Chen, all strategic calculation, quietly observed. I walked them through the incident with forensic clarity, the source, the vector, the countermeasures I'd deployed, and how narrowly we'd avoided disaster. Ms. Munroe, the CEO said finally, your expertise just saved this company. Thank you. Of course, I said. Though I have to note, this attack only succeeded because critical updates were delayed for months. It was preventable. Silence fell. All eyes turned to Robert, whose face had migrated from pale to green. No one said a word. They didn't have to. The investigation took 3 weeks. Amy's legal review was thorough and damning, months of documented security warnings ignored, budgets cut against technical recommendations, and a culture that prioritized short-term profits over system integrity. Robert was quietly reassigned to a special projects role with no direct reports. Jake Morrison withdrew from the leadership program, realizing he was completely unprepared for the responsibility. On a Friday afternoon, the CEO called me into his office. Isabel, I want to personally apologize for how you've been treated. Your expertise and dedication prevented what could have been a company-ending disaster. Thank you, sir. I'm offering you Robert's position as Director of Systems and Security, along with immediate enrollment in our leadership program. Your starting salary will reflect the value you bring to this organization. I smiled, thinking about that conversation 4 days ago. Too valuable where I was, indeed. I accept, with one condition. I want full authority over security budgets and protocols. No more cutting corners to boost departmental profits. Done. As I cleaned out my old desk, Tyler from HR stopped by. Isabel, how did you know that attack was coming? I looked up from packing my belongings. I didn't know when it would happen, Tyler. I just knew it would happen. The vulnerabilities were there, documented, and ignored. It was only a matter of time. But the timing. Sometimes the best way to prove your worth isn't to prevent a crisis. Sometimes it's to be indispensable when the crisis arrives. He stared at me for a moment, then shook his head with admiration. Remind me never to underestimate you. Don't worry, I said, shouldering my laptop bag. I'm too valuable where I am now. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Sometimes being too valuable exactly where you are means making sure everyone else realizes it too. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply being excellent at what you do when people finally understand how much they need you. Gray Holdings learned that lesson the expensive way. But they learned it.